Hello everyone, my name is Sophia. Welcome to my channel. They say keep your head cool and your feet warm. So, in order for our feet never to get cold, today I suggest we knit these socks together. My socks are wool, they are warm and will keep my feet cozy all winter long. For knitting the socks, I will be using 4 Seasons yarn. This is 100% Australian merino. One skein is 50 grams and 86 meters. The color of the yarn is called stone. The recommended needle size is 4 millimeters. If you are knitting socks for an adult with a foot size up to European 37, then most likely 2 skeins of 50 grams will be enough. If you are knitting for a larger foot size, then this amount of yarn may not be enough, so I recommend buying 3 skeins. If you're knitting for a teenager or a child, then 2 skeins will be plenty. And for baby socks, even 1 skein of yarn may be enough. The recommended needle size for my yarn is 4 millimeters, but I like socks with a denser fabric, so I will take needles one size smaller than recommended for the main knitting. In my case, these are double-pointed needles size 3.5 millimeters. And for knitting the ribbing, I will take needles one more size smaller. In my case, that is 3 millimeters. I will also need a measuring tape to take measurements, scissors and a special needle with a large eye to hide the yarn ends in the finished piece. Since it is inconvenient for me to both film and show how to take measurements on myself, I asked my 5-year-old to help me. Of course, first we need to measure the circumference of the foot. The measurement should be taken approximately in the middle, and here we got 18.5 centimeters. On the ankle we have this little hollow, and from this point you need to measure the heel height to the floor. In this case it is 6 centimeters. And the third measurement that will be useful when knitting socks is the length of the foot from the heel to the bone of the big toe. If you like socks that fit very loosely and or are knitting for a child with room to grow, then the foot length can be measured from the heel to the base of the big toe. I measure up to the joint bone and I get 13 centimeters. What to do if you cannot take measurements or, for example, are knitting for sale? In online stores or craft shops, you can try to find such sock knitting templates. This is a set where you can set the sock size and fasten the template. Thus, when you knit the sock, you can try it on the template during the process. Here I have European sizes, but I think in your country you can buy sock templates with the sizes that are used locally. Using the template, you can determine the heel height and foot length, but the template doesn't show circumference. Information about standard foot circumferences for different sizes can be found on the internet. These charts are made for sock knitters. Not the most convenient option, but it can be useful when it is completely impossible to take measurements. Also, the template doesn't give instructions for when to stop knitting straight rows and begin decreasing for the toe. From my experience, I have noticed that the width of the heel of the sock stretched on the template is approximately equal to the length of the toe decrease. So, if you use a template, then once you knit the sock to this point, you can stretch it on the template, measure the heel width and mark that distance on the template on the other side. That way, you will have a mark of how far to knit the sock before starting decreases. This will replace measuring the foot length to the big toe bone, as I showed earlier. To decide how many stitches to cast on, I need to knit a swatch. For this, I take 2 needles, larger size, 3.5 millimeters in my case, and cast on 20 stitches using the usual method. As always, in the top right corner, there will be a link to the video where I explain in detail how to cast stitches onto needles. I have cast on the stitches and begin knitting at the first row of the swatch. The swatch I will knit in stockinette stitch in flat rows. As usual, I slip the first stitch of the row to the right needle without knitting it. Then I knit all the stitches as knit stitches through the front loop. When knitting flat rows, the last stitch of the row is always purled. I purl this stitch through the front loop, then I turn the work. I slip the first stitch of the row without knitting it, and then I purl all the stitches through the front loop. The last stitch of the row is also a purl stitch. I turn the work again. The next row will also be a knit row. All odd rows are knitted and all even rows are purled. Since we are no longer knitting the very first cast on row, in all following knit rows, all knit stitches will be worked through the back loop, and all purl stitches will be knitted exactly as in the second row, through the front loop. I suggest you continue knitting on your own and knit 15 to 20 rows. Usually, when knitting a swatch, we bind off the stitches, wash and dry the swatch, and only then make the measurements. But for sock knitting, I think that would be too much of a waste of yarn. So I simply slip the swatch off the needle and lay it flat on the table without stretching it. My swatch of 20 stitches measures 9 centimeters. I did not cut the yarn, so now I can unravel the swatch and use this yarn to start knitting the sock. Now we need to calculate the number of stitches to cast on. The circumference of my foot is 24 centimeters. The swatch width is 9 centimeters, and the swatch has 20 stitches. The number of stitches needed is x. So we calculate 24 multiplied by 20 and divided by 9 equals approximately 53 stitches. At the beginning of knitting, I will make a 1 by 1 ribbing. Accordingly, the number of stitches must be divisible by 2. I round down, and I advise you always to round down. I get 52 stitches. But since socks are knitted in the round, in order to join the knitting into a circle, we need to cast on one additional stitch. So in total, I will need to cast on 53 stitches. From my set of double-pointed needles of smaller size, mine are 3 mm, I take 2 needles and I will cast on all 53 stitches onto them right away. I have cast on all the stitches onto the needles. Now I carefully remove one of the needles, making sure the stitches do not unravel. The stitches need to be distributed across 4 needles. In my case, that's 13 stitches per needle. And one extra stitch I will leave on the first needle. Now, I have distributed all the stitches onto the needles, carefully checked that the knitting has not twisted, and now I will join it into the round. As I already said in the beret video, this can be done in different ways. I will show you how I do it. Here we have the needle with the extra stitch. I slip this extra stitch onto the right needle, then pass the stitch that was on the right needle through this extra stitch, and I return that stitch back onto the right needle. I tighten the resulting knot by pulling the short yarn tail. Now this tail will indicate the beginning of the round, so there is no need to hang a marker. I want to mention that if you're only starting to knit with double-pointed needles, this type of knitting may seem very difficult. But be patient. With practice will come simplicity and enjoyment. So, I begin knitting the first round of 1 by 1 ribbing. The first stitch I knit, the second is purled, and I continue altering knit purl stitches until the end of the round. Since this is the first round, all stitches are knitted through the front loop. I have knitted the first round. I strongly advise you to write down all the rounds you knit. I am showing you how to knit socks on the second sock, so I mark in my notes which round I have knitted. This way I will end up with 2 absolutely identical socks. I continue knitting the sock ribbing, starting the second round. Since I am knitting in the round, beginning with the second round, all knit stitches will work through the front loop and all purl stitches through the back loop. I suggest you continue knitting the ribbing on your own. The only question is, how many rounds to knit? In the first sock I knitted 25 rounds of 1 by 1 ribbing. That gave me 8 centimeters. This is quite a long ribbing. You can make it shorter, for example 3 or 4 centimeters. To illustrate, I put a pen next to it. The height of my ribbing is about half the pen. In my opinion, the minimum ribbing height for an adult is about a quarter of a pen length. Any shorter will be uncomfortable to wear. By the way, if you are knitting for an adult and only have 2 skeins of yarn, then it is better to knit a shorter ribbing. I used exactly 1 skein of yarn for each sock. I knitted 25 rounds of ribbing, and in the next round I will switch to larger needles, size 3.5 millimeters in my case. And in this next round I will knit all stitches as knit stitches. I immediately put away the 5th needle of the smaller size. I take the first larger needle, I knit the first stitch through the front loop, and the next stitch I knit through the back loop. I continue knitting all the stitches on the first needle this way. Now the smaller needle is free. I put it away and take the second larger needle and continue knitting to the end of the round. I have knitted the first round in stockinette. I now need to knit a few more rounds in stockinette stitch in the round. I am knitting for an adult, so I will knit 5 rounds in total. I have already knitted one, so I need 4 more. If you are knitting for a teenager, you can knit 3 to 4 rounds. For baby, 2 to 3 will be enough. Please note that in these rounds all knit stitches are worked through the front loop. I have knitted 5 knit rounds in the round. Next we will knit this part of the sock, the heel flap. For this we will knit only part of the stitches. Now I will show you how to separate them. Here is our knitting. I will number the needles 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I knit the stitches on the first and second needles, as usual, knit stitches. Done. Now I need to knit the stitches from the third and fourth needles onto one single needle. I have knitted the stitches from the third needle, and I put aside the empty needle for now. I continue knitting the stitches from the fourth needle onto the same needle in my right hand. All stitches are knit stitches, except the last one. I knit the last one as a purl stitch through the front loop. Here is what I have now. I turn the work. From now on I will knit only the stitches on this one needle, back and forth rows. The row we just finished is row number 1. I mark this in my notes. Since I am now knitting back and forth rows, I slip the first stitch onto the right needle without knitting it. Then in the wrong side row, I purl all stitches through the front loop, including the very last stitch. Here is the last stitch of the row. I purl it, turn the work, that was row number 2. I continue knitting. Now it is a knit row. Again, I slip the first stitch without knitting it. Then I knit all stitches through the back loop, except the very last stitch. Here is the last stitch. I purl it, turn the work and continue knitting in back and forth rows. The next row is row number 4, a wrong side row. How many rows should you knit? Remember, we measured the heel height earlier. That is exactly the height we need to knit. For me, it was 21 rows and 7.5 centimeters. I simply knit row by row, placing a ruler against the work to check how much I had knitted and how much was left. What is important? In the end, you must knit an odd number of rows, and the last row must be a knit row. After that, we will continue knitting this part, starting with a wrong side row. I have finished knitting the back and forth rows. Now we continue knitting the heel turn. At this stage, we need to make this cup shape. To do that, I divided all the stitches I just knitted into 3 parts. If the number of stitches divides evenly by 3, simply separate them with markers into 3 equal groups. If the number does not divide evenly, as in my case, the remaining stitches go into the middle part. I have 26 stitches on the needle. Dividing by 3 gives me 8 stitches with 2 left over. So I put 8 stitches on each side and 10 stitches in the middle. We begin from a wrong side row. As usual, I slip the first stitch and knit all stitches as purl stitches until the first marker. I slip the marker to the right needle and continue knitting the middle stitches until there is just one stitch left. Here I have one last stitch in the middle section. I slip it onto the right needle without knitting it. I remove the marker. It will no longer be needed. I return the slipped stitch back onto the left needle and purl it together with the next stitch through the front loop. Now I have 7 stitches left on the left side section. I turn the work. I slip the first stitch of the row as usual without knitting. Then I knit all the stitches in the middle section through the back loop, except the last one. Here is the last stitch of the middle section. I slip it onto the right needle. I remove the marker, it is no longer needed. Next, I knit the first stitch of the side section as a knit through the back loop. Then I pass the slipped stitch over this newly knitted stitch. I turn the work. Do you see here? Where we knitted 2 stitches together, a small hole has already formed. This hole will show us where to make decreases, so we don't need markers anymore. We will see visually where to decrease. And I continue knitting. As usual, I slip the first stitch without knitting it. Then I purl all the stitches except the last stitch of the middle section. Here is the last stitch of the middle section, and I purl it together with the next stitch as one. I turn the work. Let me show one more time how to make decreases in a knit row. I slip the first stitch without knitting it. Then I knit the rest of the middle stitches through the back loop, except the last one. I slip the last stitch onto the right needle without knitting. The next stitch I knit. Then I pass the slipped stitch over the knitted one. Now both the left and the right side sections have 6 stitches each remaining. I suggest you continue knitting in this way on your own until there are no stitches left in the side sections. Well, I have finished turning the heel. Here is what I got. Now I need to pick up stitches to continue knitting in the round. Look, when we knitted the heel flap, edge stitches were formed along the sides. From these edge stitches we will now pick up stitches. If I pick up only one stitch from each edge stitch, then I will get too few stitches and the sock will be too tight. On the other hand, if I pick up 2 stitches from each edge stitch, then I will have too many stitches on the needles. Therefore, I prefer to alternate. From the first edge stitch I pick up 1 stitch. From the second I pick up 2. Then again 1, then 2, and so on. Where should I start picking up stitches? Here is my working yarn. From it comes the stitch that is on this needle. So I will not use these stitches for picking up. I will begin with the next edge stitch. Every edge stitch, like any stitch, has 2 legs. I insert my needle under both legs and pull up a stitch. That's the first one. From the next edge stitch, I pull up 2 stitches. First, I insert the needle under the back leg and pull 1. Then under both legs and pull another. So from 2 edge stitches, I get 3 picked up stitches. I continue picking up stitches this way until the end of the edge. I got 15 stitches picked up, but if I just start knitting now, a hole will form right here. So I need to pick up 1 more stitch, but not from an edge stitch. Here are such strands. The upper strand leads to this stitch. From it I will pick up 1 more stitch. In total I picked up 16 stitches. I write in my notebook, picked up 16 stitches, because even if I don't forget this number for the next edge, I will definitely forget it by the time I knit the second sock. For further knitting, I need a 5th needle. I knit the stitches from the next 2 needles as knit stitches until I reach the other side, where I will again pick up stitches. Now I have reached the second edge. I begin picking up stitches starting with that extra 16th one. Here is the strand leading into this stitch. I pick up the first stitch from here. Then I continue picking up stitches along the edge as before. I have picked up all the stitches, but now all 5 needles are in use. This means the stitches that are on the heel needle need to be divided in half and spread onto neighboring needles. I have 10 stitches on this needle. I divide them into 2 groups of 5. And now I need 5 stitches onto the needle where I just picked up stitches. And the remaining 5 stitches I simply slip without knitting onto the needle where I picked up stitches first. Now everything is ready. I have 4 needles with stitches and 1 working needle. From now on, this will be the beginning of the round. Pay attention, the beginning of the round has now changed. Before it was where the yarn tail was. Now it is at the middle of the heel. If you're afraid to lose the beginning of the round, please attach a marker here. Next, we continue knitting in the round. The first round I knit all stitches as knit stitches. I have finished the first round. In the next, second round, I will start making decreases. This is how the decreases look on my already finished sock, a neat little chain. Let's number the needles again. 1, 2, 3, 4. We will make decreases on the first and fourth needles, that is on the sides where we picked up the extra stitches. So on the first needle I knit all stitches as knit stitches except the last 2. Here I have the last 2 stitches on the first needle. To decrease I knit these 2 together through the front loop. If the second stitch is too tight and it's hard to insert the needle, I can pull it a little with the needle. Then I knit all stitches on the second and third needle as knit stitches. Now I have reached the fourth needle. On this needle I will make a decrease at the beginning. To make the decreases on this side and form a knit chain, I need to twist the first 2 stitches. For that I slip them onto the right needle, then return them onto the left needle turned the other way around, like this. Now I knit these 2 stitches together through the back loop. The remaining stitches on this needle I knit as knit stitches. That's the end of the second round. From here I will make decreases every other round. That is, all odd numbered rounds I will knit as plain knit rounds without decreases, as I did at the first round. And I will make decreases in the even rounds, exactly as I did in the second round. The question is how many decreases to make. Remember, at the very beginning we calculated the number of stitches and distributed them equally across the 4 needles. In my case there were 13 stitches on each needle. Now I still have 13 stitches on the second and third needles. I will continue making decreases on the first and fourth needles until they also have 13 stitches each. As a result, we will get this gusset shape, and then we will continue knitting in the round until we reach the lengths needed before starting the toe decreases. I have finished making the gusset decreases, and now I have the same number of stitches on all needles. Next, I will knit all rounds in plain stockinette stitch without decreases or increases. I need to knit this section from the end of the gusset decreases up to the point where we start shaping the toe. How long to knit? Remember, we measured the length of the foot from the heel to the big toe joint. Now I suggest knitting and from time to time laying the sock flat on a table and measuring until it reaches that length. Or you can try the sock on yourself or on the adult you are knitting for and see if the knitting has reached the big toe joint. I strongly recommend not trying socks on children while still on the needles, because it's not safe. I finished knitting the plain rounds. I got 20 rounds in total. Now the only thing left is to shape the toe. For this I will make decreases on each needle. At first I will decrease every other round, and then when only half the stitches are left on each needle, I will decrease in every round. I have 13 stitches on each needle. That number is not divisible evenly by 2, so I decided that the first 6 stitches I will decrease every other round, and then I will switch to decreasing in every round. So I begin the first decrease round. On the first needle I need all stitches except the last 3. Now I have 3 stitches left on the first needle. I knit 2 together through the front loop and then knit the last stitch as usual. On the second needle I will make the decrease at the beginning. I knit the first stitch, then twist the next 2 stitches, slip them onto the right needle, return them onto the left turned around, and knit them together through the back loop. The rest of the stitches I knit as usual. On the third needle I make the decrease the same way as on the first, at the end of the needle. On the fourth needle, the decrease is made as on the second, at the beginning of the needle. That completes the first decrease round. I mark this in my notebook, and the second round I knit all stitches plain without decreases. Then I continue altering 1 decrease round, 1 plain round until I have 7 stitches left on each needle. I knitted 6 decrease rounds and 6 plain rounds. In total that's 12 rounds. Now I have 7 stitches on each needle. From this point on, I will continue making decreases in every round, exactly the same way, but now without plain rounds in between. Now I have 3 stitches left on each needle. Time to close the toe. I knit as usual. On the first needle I knit 2 together, then 1 knit stitch. I put away the freed needle, I won't need it anymore. On the next needle I knit 1 stitch, then twist the next 2 stitches and knit them together. Now I have 4 stitches on this needle, and I will do the same on the remaining 2 needles. Now I have 2 needles with 4 stitches on each. Here is how much yarn I have left from the skein. The tail is a bit long, so I'll cut it shorter, but not too short, to make it convenient to pull through the stitches. I take a needle, thread the yarn into it, and begin slipping the stitches of the needles. I start with the needle where I would normally continue knitting if I weren't finishing. I insert the needle into the stitches in the same way as I would with the knitted needle. All the stitches are now off the needles. I carefully pull the tapestry needle to the inside of the sock. Then I turn the sock inside out. I gently pull on the yarn tail and tighten the stitches together. Now I need to secure the yarn so that the sock doesn't unravel. I like to make 2 small stitches with knots. Here are the gathered stitches. I insert the needle like this, tie a knot and tighten it. Then I do the same in the opposite direction. Let's turn the sock right side out and see the result. My sock is ready. Now we just need to deal with the yarn tails. The yarn tail at the toe I personally never weave in. I just leave it inside the sock. I only make sure it's not too long but also not too short. When worn, it doesn't show and doesn't cause discomfort. But if you want to hide it, I showed how to do this in the beret video. I'll leave a link in the description. This video is a bit too long to repeat it here. But I will repeat myself and I will show you how to hide the yarn tail from the beginning of the knitting. I thread the yarn into the tapestry needle. Then I turn the sock inside out. Here is the ribbing with its chain of stitches. I will hide the yarn tail inside this chain. I insert the needle under one of the legs of the stitch from the inside out. Then I do the same with the next stitch and so on several times. I weft in up to this point. Now I need to turn and go back in the opposite direction, about halfway. When I'm finished, I won't cut the yarn right away. First, I'll wash and dry the socks so the yarn tail gets fixed in the place inside the stitches. Only then I'll cut it. My socks are washed, dried and ready to keep my feet warm. Thank you for watching this video. If it was helpful, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe and I will see you in the next one. Bye!